Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to emulate some things you get from long exposure, but during the day, and no lens filters. So first we have to get on location. Let's get started. My car is so squeaky. Okay, so in order to do this long exposure during the day with no filters, what we're gonna have to do is take a multitude of images and stack them on top of each other. This image stacking is going to give us the desired result of emulating the long exposure properties. And what it'll do is, say if you take 5 1-second exposures, you're gonna get 5 full seconds of motion within those images. And doing this, you also reduce noise, and you can even get rid of certain things like people in the background, or if a leaf blows through your frame, it'll get rid of it. It's going to be taking the average of each color in each image. So the final outcome of the image stack will be one color. So let's think of it like numbers instead of colors. If you get a 5, a 6, and a 7, your average is gonna come out to about 5.5. So if you think about it in like colors, you're gonna get rid of the outlier. So if you have 3 images and a leaf blows through your frame in this image, it's not gonna show up because the average image, these two, don't have that leaf in it. So this, like I said, it gets rid of noise, gets rid of people, gets rid of any distractions. The issue with this, that it's not exactly like long exposure, is since you're taking multiple images, you have time between each frame that your camera isn't exposing for. So light trails don't work with this necessarily because you have gaps in the lights. This works especially well for clouds and water, anything with continuous motion that's somewhat repetitive but random. So now that you kind of understand what it is we're doing and how the science of it works, let's move on to what gear you need. Alright, so the gear you need for this is really minimal. It's just like any long exposure. You need a tripod and a camera, and then maybe some way to trigger your camera so you're not introducing camera shake at all. So a trigger is like 15 bucks on Amazon. There's wireless ones. Both of my cameras, you can use your phone to trigger it. Most of them have like a 2-second timer on them, which you can just click it over and over again. You can also use time-lapse features. If you have that, just have it set to do a time-lapse over like 15 to 20 seconds. And you can use the time-lapse feature to take photos over 15 to 20 seconds to get however many photos you need. So you'll need a computer with Photoshop in it. That's how I'm gonna show you how to do it. I process my images in Lightroom, and then I move them to Photoshop for the merging, just because I think the raw processing out of Lightroom is a little bit more user-friendly. And something to keep in mind with this is that the stronger camera you have with the bigger images, the better computer you'll probably need to make this work faster. So if I take 15 images, it's going to take me a long time to combine my images together in Photoshop, just because it's taking so many millions of averages and having to spit a color out in the correct order. So what you can do is you can take like 5 images, stack them together, take the next 5 images, stack them together, take the next 5 images, stack them together. So you have 3 final images, and then you merge those 3 together. Make sure when you're doing this, you're doing at least 3 images, because it won't be able to really take that good of an average from 2 images, and you don't get as much motion out of it either. So let's go ahead and get on to the shooting practices. Okay, so confession time. I picked today because overcast means you can have a bigger shutter speed, and it did just rain in Indianapolis like all day. The ground's still wet, so I kind of just assumed the river would be moving a little bit. As you can tell, I have no clouds that are moving that you can even see, or water that's really moving to show you an example. So what I'm gonna do is I'm still gonna walk you through the shooting practices behind this whole thing. It's just not gonna be me editing the images I took today, because I just don't think it shows the right idea behind this whole thing. So here's basically the gist of the shooting practices. All right, so camera practices. So since this is kind of a mini time lapse that takes the effects of long exposure, you kind of have to mix the way you shoot both of those things. First things first, make sure you have your camera set to manual mode. You don't want the camera making any decisions for you. I like to leave mine on manual focus as well, because sometimes if I don't have my things set up exactly right, if I leave it to autofocus, it'll try to focus after every image, and that can get kind of wavy. So now that you've got your camera in manual mode, you want to try to get your shutter as long as possible. You don't want anything like a 3,000th of a second. You don't want anything even like a 1,000th of a second or even 500th of a second. You want to try to get it as long as you can to capture as much motion to your image, because that's what emulates the long exposure effect. So what you're going to do, since you're in manual mode, you have to make all the decisions. Set your ISO to 100, even 50 if it'll go that low. That way you're letting in as little light onto the sensor as you can. Next, you're going to change your aperture. I like to set mine starting at about f16. Since you're at f16, your aperture is nice and closed. You're not letting as much light in. That way you can have a longer shutter speed. Now your shutter speed is where you make all your decisions. So open up your shutter speed as much as you can. I like to try to get mine below a 50th of a second for best results. So if you have a bunch of images that are like at a 100th of a second, you can still get motion, especially if you set your camera to shoot like a second apart from each other. So now that you're there, you'll set your camera on your tripod. You'll plug your remote in, or you'll sync it to your phone, or you'll set it to 2 seconds, and then you'll just start taking pictures. Now, something you want to keep track of is what the sun is doing. If it's kind of a cloudy day and the sun keeps popping in and out, that can mess up your whole shoot. So make sure all of your shots are when the sun is either in broad daylight, or for best results and least amount of light, you want it to be behind a cloud. When it's behind the cloud, you'll just be looking up and you'll be taking the shots until you see the sun come out again or the light start to change. Now, what's nice about this is if it is a cloudy day, you'll see the clouds will kind of smooth out as well, or you can even mask out certain things in Photoshop with one of the original images to just have the water smooth, and you can have crystal clear clouds. So now that all of our images are taken, there's not really much else we can do now until we get it onto the computer. So let's go ahead and head back to the studio. Alright, so we are back in the studio now. I've got my photos open in Lightroom. We're going to start there. So you see I have the first image selected. This is from my Chicago shoot. I've got 10 photos all here, all at about a 1/5 of a second. So when we combine those together, I'll get about 2 seconds worth of motion, give or take. You'll see this one's already edited. This one is not. There's a bit of distortion on that old lens I was using. If you notice the difference between those two. What you'll want to do is you want to make them all identical. That way when they stack, there's not any bleeding or anything like that when it tries to make averages in all the pixels. So you'll select all of them. I'm holding the shift key and clicking the last one. Got the 10 selected I want. There's 2 ways to do it. You can either hit sync, or you can right click, develop settings, sync settings. So I hit sync, make sure everything is checked. We want everything identical. And there they go. We've now got all of the images pretty much identical other than the motion, which is good. So next we will open them in Photoshop. What I do is I right click, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. So also you're going to be getting kind of a 2-in-1 tutorial here. I'm going to show you how to do it twice, and we're going to do it also, it's saved in an action. And what an action is a series of events that you recorded that you can just click one button and it'll do all those actions again. It'll make more sense once you see it. What this does, it saves a lot of time. So when I'm doing like weddings, or if I'm doing just going out and shooting multiple of these things, I can just highlight them all and then click that action button, and it'll do all of these steps for me. The only thing I really have to do is wait on my computer to load whatever I've been doing, but it's so much faster because you're not having to move around and click and remember what you're doing. And so you'll get to see this whole thing twice, but the second time's gonna be much faster because it'll be done for us. All right, and so now that we have all of our images open in Photoshop, what I like to do anyways is I like to put them all in a folder. So you can either highlight all of them and hit Control G, or just click this little group icon and you'll see it puts them all in this nice little folder so I can keep track of everything. Another thing I like to do is take one of these images and copy it to outside the folder. That way I have one image to work with in terms of like masking or something like that, if you want to put that on top of the final merged image. So you can, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can just go to right click and duplicate layer, save it as copy, and then you can move it outside, or you can alt drag, that also works. What we're gonna do is we're gonna be doing an action, and to start recording that action, what I like to do is make a new file for it. So you'll click create new action. What I wanna do is highlight everything first. That way whenever I click the action, it'll just start from the items I have highlighted, because sometimes you don't wanna merge everything. Once they're highlighted, we'll click create new action. I'm gonna be putting it in my temp edits folder. We'll call it median, because what we're doing is median stacking. And now that we're recording the action down here, we'll convert those to a smart object. So converting to a smart object basically gives you control over multiple layers in different ways. This can take a while, so I'll go ahead and skip ahead. All right, so now we're in here, and one thing I did forget to mention is sometimes whenever you have all of your items, they need to be aligned. I don't usually put that in the action, but after you highlight everything, you just go to edit auto align, and it does a pretty good job of making sure everything's in the same spot. If you're shooting on a tripod, that shouldn't matter. All right, so now that we have everything as a smart object, you'll see that there's not a change yet, is you will come up to layer and go to smart object and stack mode and choose median. Now there's a bunch of other objects here that you can try and play around with, and you can get different effects. Mean and median aren't too far off. I just prefer median because I think it does a little bit better at noise reduction. I can't prove that. So you'll click median. This also might take a while depending on how many items you have and how big your camera is. You'll see I have the loading screen up now. So I'll go ahead and skip ahead on this part for you. All right, so now that we're done waiting on it to merge our layers, I like to keep this one up here because you'll see a before and after. Now, it doesn't look like it's doing a lot. It is kind of leveling out this area down here, making it a bit smoother, which makes sense. I think we said it was about 2 whole seconds, so that would be pretty close. You'll be able to notice a little bit more of a difference down here. Notice the cars are kind of disappearing. Apparently there's a gentleman over here standing taking pictures as well. So it kind of smooths out the water, and because it was nice and wavy right here, and it's now just a nice flat line. And another thing I wanted to show you guys was the noise reduction properties. Now, we're zoomed in at 200%. This was taken at ISO 100, so there wasn't really much noise to begin with. I mean, it's digital. There's always gonna be some form of noise, at least in today's technology. So I'm zoomed in at 200%. We're gonna look at this dark area right here because it is going to pretty much disappear when it comes to noise. So that's another big advantage to doing this median stacking. Now we'll look at the clouds, because it was 1/5 of a second. The clouds were going kind of slow. Let's find a nice area to look at. There, this will work. See how the clouds, it's hard to tell because they were moving so slow and it wasn't a lot of stacks, but they are smoothed out quite a bit. But once we're done here, you're gonna hit stop, because that saves your action. So you can see I've been show hiding a bunch. I'm going to delete all those show hides, just because they don't need to be there. Delete selection and set stack mode. So the last thing I really need is that set stack mode. So there's your action. So it pretty much recorded everything we did from that point until now. Again, I'm just gonna show you this real quick. I'm gonna move this below because I want this to be my main section of the image because I have so much less noise in it. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make it a mask, and then let's say we want the motion in the water back. So it is a white. We'll make sure our color is selected to black. We've got our mask selected. Make sure you got a nice, decent brush. I'm gonna do a real kind of shoddy job just so you guys can see how it'll work. So now that I have all my motion back in the water, I do like that image. See how it's just the water's no longer moving in and out. So this is 2 images. This bottom water section is from one of the original takes. And then this is all the nice noise reduction and smoother cloud area from the image stack. Okay, so now that you have the action saved, I'm gonna show you guys how to use the action. So now I'm in Lightroom again. I've got my 12 images selected, all edited already. I'm going to right click, edit in, and then I'm going to open as layers in Photoshop. All right, now we've got our images open in Photoshop again. Remember, what I like to do is put them all in a group, just so I can keep track of everything. I'll alt drag one of the images out just to copy it, so I can have a nice before and after. And the reason I'm doing this mainly is because I wanted to show you guys a more extreme example of how median stacking can smooth out, especially water. So you'll see there's a lot of motion in this image. Now something I mentioned earlier is you may need to align them. I noticed this rock moved a bit whenever I was see right there, it's moving a bit. Now it's hard to tell, but right there, that rock is moving. So what you can do is highlight all of them, and then you'll go to edit and auto align layers. It usually does a really good job. I like to just make sure and hit reposition because I know there's no distortion because I have them all copied the same. Plus it speeds things up a little bit. All right, now that my images are aligned, they should be a little bit better. And yeah, just by clicking through, I can tell these have already aligned a little bit. Okay, so we have everything highlighted. Just like before, we hit that. Now, what I'm gonna do real quick is just clean up this mess. So it just needs to be a 2-step action. So I'll go ahead and click play on that action, and it will very slowly, so I'm going to skip ahead, it's going to do everything we did. It's going to convert our selection into a smart object, and then it's going to choose that stack mode. Again, it just saves you time from having to click around on things that you do over and over again. That's really what the purpose of actions are for. All right, and there it is. There's the final merge median stack of everything on this image. It was 12 images. I can't recall, I think it was at like something close to 50th of a second. But 12 of them all stacked out, and there was a lot of motion. My bird's being crazy, I'm sorry. There was a lot of motion going on, and I don't know if you can see her back there. Bird, she's being crazy. I don't know. Anyways, there was a ton of motion going on, and there's the before and after. Nice and smoothed out. It does a pretty good job of emulating the effects of long exposure on water during the day by stacking these together. Let's zoom in a little bit. See, the water is all splashing over it, and then takes the average of all those images. And this works on waterfalls, it works on rain puddles, it works on pretty much everything involving water if you want to try to capture motion. So I'm gonna throw up a couple other examples of times that I've personally used this here at the end of this video. This is actually my first tutorial, so if you guys liked it, let me know with a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more like this, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks.